So this video talks about how a skeletal muscle contracts or shortens, and that actual process is known as the sliding filament theory. So we're explaining the sliding filament theory in this video. In order to understand it, you first need to have an understanding of how a muscle is set up. So here it just shows a muscle connected to a bone by tendon and surrounded by that connective tissue of fascia. A muscle unit can be further broken down into muscle fibers, muscle cells, and those are comprised of hundreds of little myofibrils. So looking at the myofibrils up close and personal, you'll see these little contractile units called sarcomeres, and that is what needs to experience the movement in order to create a skeletal muscle contraction. So the parts of a sarcomere that we need to be aware of for this class are myosin and actin. Myosin on this picture is shown by the horizontal purple line, and actin is showcased by the horizontal green line. So what we need to know is in order for that sarcomere to shorten or for the muscle to contract, we need myosin to bind to actin and move it, and that's what actually causes the muscle contraction. However, myosin cannot attach to actin initially because actin is protected or surrounded by these protein bands called tropomyosin. And then the yellow dots right here represent troponin, which are bundles of that protein. So that actually surrounds and covers the actin, which does not allow myosin to bind to actin to create the contraction. So once a nerve fiber releases its impulse in a muscle, calcium is released, and that's what's shown here in these little dots. And luckily, that troponin really is attracted, really needs calcium to survive. So once the calcium is released into the sarcolemma, that contractile unit, the troponin moves to attach to the calcium. Therefore, it pulls on the tropomyosin, pulling it out of the way so that there's a clear pathway now for the myosin to get to the actin. So that's calcium's role in this whole thing, in the muscle contraction. We also need this substance called ATP. It's molecular energy. That's within the sarcolemma as well, and it serves important functions. First is ATP. When it breaks down into ADP and phosphate. And once it breaks down, those two substances are actually what give these myosin heads the energy it needs to move towards the actin. So these energy molecules give the myosin energy to move to the actin and pull it. And then more ATP is released, allowing the release of the myosin heads from the actin so that it can either continue to pull it or continue to make a contraction or release the contraction. Here's a video that explains just that. So what you're seeing here is the myosin moving along the actin. And this is showing you how the calcium ions, why they are important. So when the calcium is released into the sarcomere after the nerve stimulation stimulates the muscle, it binds to that troponin, moving the tropomyosin out of the way, allowing a clear pathway for the myosin to attach to the actin and move it, thus causing the shortening of the muscle or the contraction. So that's showing calcium's role. This is showing the ATP, the energy enzyme's role in giving the myosin the energy. First, it's going to show you how it makes it detach. And then when it breaks down, It gives myosin the energy to then come back up and attach onto the actin and move it. So what we need to know for this class is that when myosin binds to actin and moves it, that is what causes a muscle contraction. And we need the presence of calcium ions and ATP in order to allow actin and myosin to bind together.